Hello and welcome to our second Games That Weren't video, looking at some of the findings on the discs of the late Archer Maclean, who sadly passed away in 2022. In August 2023, Games That Weren't was tasked with trying to preserve all of Archer's work discs, including Atari and C64 formatted discs. At the time of writing, work is still ongoing, though we have been given permission by Chris Wilkins of Fusion Retro Books to add any executable or early prototypes to show you that we find along the way. Today, we have a series of prototypes from the first international karate game on the Commodore 64, as well as some interesting demos and graphical assets found along the way. We will then take a look at how the game evolved into International Karate Plus, showcasing some prototypes that built up within the original codebase. First up are a small selection of prototypes from the first international karate game. First up is a very early demo of international karate, which has no interactivity apart from just showing two fighters which are fighting against each other, controlled by the computer. There's no score panel at the top, there's no sound effects or anything like that at all. Just the referee at the side giving the points that are scored every time a hit is made. The background that you see is in the final game, so there isn't too much that's not present in the final game. But again, you can't start this or do anything with it. Potentially Archer may have produced this just to kind of showcase and demonstrate to magazines or to use as a demo on gaming stands back in the day. It's not entirely sure. The next demo is a bit more familiar. It features a lot more elements that you all know and love. Here we're seeing a two-player game taking place. Again, you can't interact with it at all. You can only watch the events that are carrying on. For this one, there's no sound effects present. It just has a version of Archer's music that's playing in the background, and that's about it. Again, this may have been a demonstration that had been taken to shows and was just showing off the game without any ability to interact, or maybe to kind of get people's interest and get people talking about the game. Next up is a really interesting speech demo that was found on one of the discs. This seems to have been set up by some of the team members from Analog Software, who had their own kind of speech system that was used in games such as, I think, Five-a-Side Football. It seems that a speech demo had been sent to Archer, possibly on request, just to kind of give some examples of karate-based sounds. And clearly we don't think that Archer was particularly impressed with this, so he never used it and he created his own sound effects that you all know and love. But we'll just play it now so you can actually hear each one. You can see how ridiculous some of them do sound, but a very interesting piece of history to be saved.
Begin. Red. White. Half point. Full point. Judge. Fire! Begin.
We've all known that Archer was a huge fan of Way the Exploding Fist and was heavily inspired by that game, which had come out the year before. Archer had wanted to make his game a much faster and smoother experience compared to the Melbourne House title, and he was confident that he could do so. Within one of the early work discs, there were interestingly a series of sprite rips which you can see on the screen now from the Melbourne House game, indicating that Archer had been investigating how the fighter sprites worked within that game, possibly to get inspiration for setting up his own fighters for international karate, or working out how the sprite system could work on the C64. This is all we have found so far for international karate on the Commodore 64 prototype-wise, but there's more potentially to be found for the Atari versions, so keep an eye out sometime. We will now take a look at how International Karate evolved into International Karate Plus on the Commodore 64. After completing International Karate, Archer was trying to figure out what to do next, and one of his ideas was to try and come up with a version of his fighting game with 3 players, something that had never been done before. He kept that close to his chest and didn't want to kind of reveal anything to anyone until he got something working. He began by looking at the original code base and started to hack away to try and get something up and running. This first prototype is the earliest example we can find where he's trying to do exactly that. Here we can see something not quite working, but we can see the beginning of the third sprite attempting to appear at the top and middle of the screen there. This was just Archer just trying to get something up and running initially, but there isn't really much to see or any indication of this being IK+. The second prototype gets a lot closer and starts to feel a lot more like a sequel. Here we see 3 players using the old moves from the original game, but with the fighters from IK+. Unfortunately, it's still quite glitchy, but we can see the concept getting there and working. And it looks quite exciting too, so you can imagine that when Archer saw 3 players working and interacting, you could see that this idea, had impetus to go far. It'd be the third and final prototype, which would be the most solid overall. This one though, we wonder if this was shown to Activision to get their attention and to get sign up for the game. We're not 100% sure. The third and final prototype is very bizarre. It's a lot more stable and a bit more polished, still glitchy, but the score panel is now IK+, and there's also the referee from IK+ as well, including a 1987 Activision credit, which just seems very odd. It's almost like the 2 code bases have been spliced together from both games. And of course you've still got Rob Hubbard's music from the original game too. It's an interesting look to see how Archer is trying to get the 3 fighters working and how things evolved into International Karate Plus. It isn't quite clear if if he continued just to hack away at the IK code until it became IK+, or if at some point he did sort of start from scratch. But from what we can see, it did look like he built over the top as he went along, which kind of makes sense, it's to kind of build on something that already works and then just improve it. And much of the game is quite similar in many ways to the original game. So yeah, a very interesting look at how IK Plus kind of evolved. Then there was a music demo which was supplied to Archer by Rob Hubbard, which is pretty much what was in the final game, apart from 2 sound effects which seem to have never featured in the final game in the form of explosion effects, which we'll show you now. So first of all, we've got a bit of music, and then you'll hear the sound effects in a moment. Series of graphic screens were also found, which indicate how the iconic background to International Karate Plus was created and evolved. Here we can see the very early startings of that background, which then gradually built up and started to turn into that final background that we all know and love. This kind of always find this stuff interesting to look at and see how things evolved. It was very cool to see. And there was also a score panel play around as well by Archer, kind of showing how the score panel bits could look and sort of feel. So there's a couple of the icons there and some concepts that were never used in the final game. And then also some kind of fish and bird sprites and a splash sprite, but it looks of it was never used. Then we had a bit of a surprise when we found a quickly hacked version of International Karate Plus, which includes sleeveless fighters. It seems that Archer is toying with the idea of having sleeveless fighters just for the US version of the game, but the idea of this was dropped for some particular reason. There are two builds. This one is fairly stable, but not quite right with the graphics. The other one, which we'll see in a moment, is almost there with the graphics, but it's extremely unstable. But hopefully it's something that will be fixed by the time we add to the site or at a later date. Here's that second prototype. So the sprites are kind of joined up properly now, but something's not quite right, and it'll probably crash in a moment. Overall, this is all we've found so far, though keep checking our page on International Karate and International Karate Plus for further findings. If we do find anything more, we'll continue to add to these pages on the site. If you want to play these prototypes for yourself, please check out the Games That Weren't website, and also the links in the video description where you can read more about our findings and also download and check out for yourself. We hope you've enjoyed these findings today. We hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching. Much of the work wouldn't have been possible thanks to the following people. To Chris Wilkins of Fusion Retro Books for the loan of Archer's Disc to Preserve and permission to add executables to the site. To Alan Hammerton for hardware help and also providing some equipment. And then finally to Matt Allen for the flippy PC drive loan due to technical issues with my own drive. Thank you and see you on the next video.